What happens after we die? It's one of the fundamental questions that drives all human interest in religion, philosophy, and science. But while it might not conform to strict materialism, we actually do have a huge body of evidence about what the so-called afterlife might look like. You've heard of near-death experiences, but you might not know how rigorously they've been studied. There are thousands of documented cases that reveal remarkably consistent patterns. So that's what's up for today. NDEs, afterlife cosmologies, how the James Webb Space Telescope is breaking Big Bang Theory, and what the handprint of God might look like to someone trying to build a religion. Oh, and a few hours before we started recording, I heard about Robert Monroe's visit to the afterlife, so we talk about that too. In other words, if you can only listen to one more podcast before you die, you could do worse than this one. Spectrovision Radio. Welcome to Gods, Ghosts, and UFOs, the biggest podcast in the universe, where we talk about all the things they said weren't real. Today, it's just me and Mallory. Tom is recovering from a brutal bout with the flu. Curse the season. In his absence, and in his honor, we'll be talking about death and hell. More specifically, we're talking about near-death experiences, other visions of the afterlife, and what any of that might have to do with religious belief systems. In other words, just some icebreaker material for your next dinner party. Okay. Mal, I'm curious, where would you like to start? Because I can think of any number of places that we could start.
Okay, well, I guess I'd like to start with maybe where your interest in this started, and I can just say a bit about it for me. I mean, we both grew up Mormon, and so that means that we have a very rich idea of what the afterlife is. And I think that means, I can only speak for myself, but I think that means that we might be presented with lots more stories like this because they are almost presented like evidence that our belief system is correct often. So we always talk about the afterlife and that it's going to be like this, and this guy, his heart stopped and guess what he saw? It was like a classroom. It's like because we believe that there's like a space in between sort of the heaven experience and the life experience where you might be taught a bit. And anyway, so there's a confirmation bias thing happening with Mormons where they're more likely to hear about near-death experiences. That's my take at the moment.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right.
If you have a rich cosmology for the afterlife in your religion, I'm assuming that you probably hear stories like that because people love to tout them as facts.
Well, you have family and friends who tell you their experiences with their loved ones, their experiences with people. There's actually, I would say Mormonism has a pretty rich cosmology when it comes to ancestors. I mean, that's a very, very big deal in our community. And so there's a lot of stories. I mean, really endless stories of people interacting with people who've passed on in some way or another. Some of them very detailed and vibrant, some of them very compelling. And so, yeah, I think that it reinforces those ideas very strongly. A lot of those, call them near-death experiences or call them bedside experiences with people on their deathbeds. Yeah. And so I think that there's a lot of that going on. And I think this is an interesting phenomenon. It's just a human thing. We gather a bunch of evidence around something that we don't quite understand, and then we put together this whole picture. And we think the picture gets clearer and clearer and clearer because we add more and more data to it, to the point that we think, okay, now we get it. Now we know what this all is and how this all works. And what's interesting to me is that you can see this happening in every single domain. You can see it happening in science. Like, I watched this great Kurzgesagt video, which I think I shared with you and Tom. I don't know if you guys checked it out. But basically, it was talking about what we've been talking about, which is that, the big cosmological paradigms of science are breaking down thanks to the James Webb Space Telescope, which can suddenly see way farther and way more than we ever have been able to see with our previous big space telescopes like Hubble. And so there's this brand new big eye, basically, to see the universe with. And what it's showing us is stuff that absolutely breaks our concepts of how we thought the universe worked. And so now people are like, Big Bang, yeah, but maybe, maybe not. I don't know. And people are kind of panicking. And this is all totally materialist science world. We're not talking about anything, spiritual or metaphysical or whatever. This is just like people who are like, this is how the universe works based on all the data that we have collected, all of this, signatures of star systems and galaxies and all the things that they've gathered over the centuries that we've been looking at the skies with instruments more powerful than our eyeballs. And what they're finding now with this brand new eyeball is that this really clear picture that they painted that everyone was like pretty confident about, so confident that there have been many points over the past couple of 100 years where some super prominent scientist says, yeah, I think we figured pretty much everything out. It's like there's not much left. And then, of course, like some big breakthrough happens, but we get comfortable again. We say, I think we've probably figured pretty much everything out. Anyway, all this is to say, we're living in a very exciting time scientifically because there's this new set of data that is sort of incontrovertible and is like, you are wrong. It's not to say that we're wrong about everything, but it's certainly to say that some of the foundational assumptions we made about how the universe works were wrong. And we have to figure out what that means and contend with that. And that's a complicated, challenging issue. It must be very exciting and very frustrating to be an astronomer right now, an astrophysicist, etc. But the same thing happens in religions over and over and over again. And the good ones.
And in the individuals.
Individuals in the religions, yeah. I mean, and that's on the small scale, like it should be happening all the time. And I think this is what growth looks like. It's the constant changing and reshaping of a thing as it gets bigger and different. This is as natural as it can possibly be. And I think actually there's a real problem. You can identify a real problem if you notice that you haven't changed your cosmological outlook in a while. Like if you've been fairly comfortable and secure in the way that you think and believe, then you might not be as alive as you think. And you're certainly not as right as you think. And so, but I've been watching this happen, and you and I, like you said, we've grown up in this church, and so we can kind of see this is the big, clear picture that they've painted for us since we were kids. And you grow up and you're like, I think I understand how it all works. And now we're very much adults, and we've been kind of contending with a lot of competing stories and ideas. And I've discovered, and this is so generalized and probably kind of very boring to listen to me talk like this. But I just want to say that like a lot of what I believed or was taught or whatever, a lot of it does hold up really well, but just not in the same shape as maybe I thought it did. And that's totally okay. The biggest thing though, and this is the thing that I think I'm excited to just dig into a little bit to start with, we were going to talk about NDEs today. And NDEs are a really fun topic because they are this body of quote unquote evidence, right? It's testimonial evidence, but it's evidence. It's this large body of evidence that I think a lot of people don't recognize, like they don't realize how big of a body of evidence is and how rigorous the science that has been done on this particular phenomenon is. But you can use that body of evidence just like anybody uses any body of evidence to support the big cosmological picture that you've painted or to disrupt the cosmological picture you've painted. And if you're looking at data as earnestly and as authentically as you can, with as open mind as you can, you will find change. You will find growth. Like things will be different than you thought, and that's okay.
I'm reading a book called My Bright Abyss by Christian Wyman, and he's talking about faith in God, but I actually think it applies to what we're talking about with just receiving feedback from life and reality and having to alter, like pretty much constantly, alter your perception and alter the way that you're looking at things, recognize that the shape is changing and develop a kind of hardiness around that. He says there is no way to return to the faith of your childhood, not really, unless you've just woken from a decades-long and absolutely literal coma. Life is not an error, even when it is. That is to say, whatever faith you emerge with at the end of your life is going to be not simply affected by that life, but intimately dependent upon it. For faith in God is, in the deepest sense, faith in life, which means that even the staunchest life of faith is a life of great change. It follows that if you believe at 50 what you believed at 15, then you have not lived or have denied the reality of your life, which is exactly what you just said. So I just thought it was very appropriate.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Except so much more succinct and poetic. Oh, I love it.
He's a poet, so he's quite good with words.
Good man. So NDEs, what is your knowledge of or experience or interest in NDEs?
Yeah, I mean, well, just as pretty much with almost all matters on this podcast, I always feel like I'm the everymanist, like where I'm like, I have like armchair interest in all of this stuff,
I mean, I think that's all of us. I think
But
that's all three of us.
You and Tom have done a lot more reading, and I feel like you have access to a lot more resources and people and ideas that are much more concrete than what I've like gleaned from. It almost feels like just like decades of slumber parties and like telling stories. You know what I mean? It's not to like sound sexist actually, because I didn't mean to just like be like I'm just a dumb girl. But
I had slumber
genuine.
parties when I was a kid. I miss slumber parties.
Yeah, I know they're amazing. Anyway, what I really feel like I know, I've gotten from a couple of books that I've read, and especially after I had some friends pass away, I had more than one person recommend a book about near-death experiences afterward. I think just to give me peace about the prospect that I had two very close friends pass away in my 20s, and the first death was a huge blow, and the second death was just like kicking someone while they're down. So I have pondered death a lot, and
Yeah.
so that was initially how I started becoming much more familiar with not just NDEs but also like mediums. I watched like a fair amount of like reality shows about it. I read a book about a Mormon guy who was in a coma for like 35 days and shared his experience. Of course, it's just his experience, and it also, again, like very much confirms a lot of the Mormon story. And so it's just very fascinating to me. Never something I've tried to pin down or do a lot of data collection on, but that's kind of where I'm at. So I understand that most people seem to have some kind of experience where they're overwhelmed by love, where they actually do not want to return to their bodies. They often have some kind of guide, sometimes a person that they know, like someone from their ancestry or from their past, who guides them and tells them about what's going on. I feel like a lot of the stories I've heard have some similar themes in that sometimes you just don't need to speak at all. Like you just understand everything in a different way. There's a different type of communication. And then I have heard more than one story where it seems that there's some kind of some sort of instruction happening, or some kind of almost like reparation for your life. Like I heard this one story that was pretty wild because the way it happened was super wild. And the woman, after she had this near-death experience, eventually did become a medium. When she was a teenager, she was in one of those haunted houses where you go, not a real haunted house, but where you go through and like scare people and scream at people. And she was in a room where she was supposed to be like a hanging body and then wake up and scream and alarm everyone. And she accidentally, at the end of the day, like when there was almost no one left, did accidentally hang herself. And so then exactly, so bleak and scary and crazy.
Gosh.
And she was dead for like 10 minutes or something before people found her. Like her heart stopped for a long time. I'm getting some of the details wrong probably, but this story was told to me in a makeup chair by a makeup woman when I was working on a TV show. But she had spoken with this woman specifically because she was a medium after her brother died. Anyway, yeah, that story was wild. And in it, she mentioned that she was guided around the afterlife situation. And there were people in like tanning beds. They were in tanning beds and they were being almost medicated for what had happened in their lives. And she got the impression that what was happening was that people who had maybe done a lot of bad things were finding ways to be healed and to come to grips and, I guess, rehabilitated after the knowledge of what they had done they were able to comprehend. Anyway, so those are the themes for me that I feel like I hear all the time. The love, the guides, and then some kind of instruction.
Which lines up pretty cleanly with what we were taught when we were growing up.
It really does. Is why I started there.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
I don't actually know how.
Yeah. Well, so, okay, actually just this morning, so we didn't know Tom wasn't going to be joining us today until this morning because he wasn't sure if he would be able to or not, and he, let us know. He's like, I can't do it. And we're like, okay, great. But so we had a couple of stories prepared, but we were like, maybe we want to hold those off because we were kind of looking forward to sharing them with Tom. So I listened to an episode of the Jordan Crowder podcast this morning, Conscious Observers. It's another SpectreVision show, by the way. So he's been doing readings of Robert Monroe's books. He'll take a chapter and he'll just read it and talk about, like, do commentary. In the episode I listened to this morning, which we'll link to, he goes over a chapter where Robert Monroe went to visit the afterlife. For those of you who aren't familiar, Monroe was the founder of the Monroe Institute. He was this guy who just did hundreds or thousands of out-of-body consciousness exploration, et cetera, wrote about a lot of it, tried to get as much of it as he could into the Institute, the Monroe Institute, who has been trying to disseminate what he learned. I mean, it's quasi-religious, actually. So he wrote these books. And so one of the chapters in this book is about how he was guided into and visited the afterlife. And I won't try to get into all the details. You should absolutely go listen to the episode. It's incredible.
Okay.
But one of the things that came up was this idea that once you die, you go into a realm where you can essentially conjure up a physical feeling reality that is a holding place for you. And that there are collaborative places that are conjured up, and that there are places that people, individuals, go just to be on their own and just kind of like decompress. And they're as wide and varied as people are. So it's like, and it's this sort of vast, maybe almost infinite sort of expanse of a place that is connected in strange and kind of unexpected ways, but that it feels real to the people who are there. And that there's a lot of guidance going on. And there are a lot of different types of people who pass through. Like, as one example, he talks about going into a place that felt a lot like a hospital. Yeah. And the people who were there were explaining to him that this is where doctors who had passed on went, because they were very familiar with it, and because it would be a gentler way for them to be introduced to the concept that they were now dead. And that
makes so much
right?
sense to me.
It seems
like such perfect? A kindness.
Yeah, and he was like, well, how do I get to a more, a common area? And they were like, oh, well, go out those doors and then go down, there's this path through the woods, go down that path, and then you'll meet some other people. And so he goes out the doors and he goes out down this path, and he's like, and he was amazed at how real and tangible everything felt. And then he met with another person who was there for him, who was waiting for him, and was like, and just had some things that they wanted to tell him. One of the things he mentioned, and this is why I wanted to bring it up, is that it was easier for people who didn't have really strong belief systems. Because if you had a really strong belief system, that would dictate your afterlife experience. Like, you would have an afterlife experience that in some way was manifested by your belief system, which, if you think about it, makes sense, especially if it's a collective belief system. So there are lots of people who are contributing to the idea of this thing that could exist in the afterlife. And which also sort of explains, if we, for the sake of argument, take this for granted, that people, when they have near-death experiences, often encounter whatever god they tend to worship. What does that mean? Well, it may mean that part of the substance or the structure of what we're calling the afterlife is a manifestation of the belief systems of the people who are there, which makes this even more obviously and transparently co-creative or collaborative than the reality that we talk about.
I have a quick question. So you said that it's easier for people who don't have
That's really what he said.
Rigid...
And the reason
Why?
He said it, my guess would be, because he didn't go into detail of why, but my guess would be if you don't have a really robust belief system, but you're instead very open. And here's the thing, because you could also classify atheism as a very robust belief system.
Yes, exactly.
So, like, no matter what your belief
that
system
God is a dick and that you should be terrified.
Exactly.
And that
oh
life
my
is
gosh.
miserable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the idea is that if you don't have a really strong, robust belief system, but you're instead sort of open and just like curious, that when you die, not as many things will surprise you. So you will be able to see better what is actually happening and what needs to happen next, rather than having to essentially be coddled through the experience because you have a big set of very firm expectations about what's going to happen, if that makes sense. That's what I got from it.
Yeah, I mean, coddle is probably a negative word. Maybe it's like, just that some things if time doesn't exist, who knows? But like that it would take longer.
Yeah.
Quote unquote, for somebody who needed to get the like Mormon on ramp or the Catholic on ramp or like the Muslim on ramp or whatever.
All right, so I don't know how much of this we're allowed to talk about, Mallory. You and I worked on another show together, and I'm not going to name the show, although clever listeners will be able to find the name of the show in some of the publishing materials, because it never got greenlit, but it's still technically owned by the entity who hired my company to make the show, or to make the pilot. But in rough broad strokes, it involved NDEs and NDE research. And I would say I was probably less interested or involved or aware of NDE stories than you were when I started that project.
Yeah.
But then I went down the rabbit hole because I was like researching and preparing or whatever. I talked to Jeffrey Long, probably one of the world's preeminent researchers and scientists in the field of NDEs. It was a great conversation. Talked to him for like over an hour one day. Do you want to very briefly and without using names or specifics summarize the story that we did for that pilot?
Yeah, well, you're the person who introduced me to this because, like I said, I had a decent amount of interest in NDEs and people's stories about the afterlife just in my own grieving process. But I had never heard before that there are some people who, instead of having these hearing angelic voices or having these like heavenly feelings of love, they actually go to hell. And so that was what the pilot was about. We interviewed somebody who went to hell after being very, very close to death. He was a gunshot victim. If I remember right, he was like shot in the head.
Yeah.
So it was very intense, and he was in a medically induced coma or just a full-on coma, I can't remember, for a very long time. And he went to a place that was like a cave full of stalactites and stalagmites, and had like demons peel skin off of his back and stuff. And I'm to this day befuddled and fascinated by it. And in some ways, like the questions that I had for him, not just about the experience, but how his life changed because of it, and how somebody comes back from an experience like that, like from the worst trip in the world, and like a possible peek behind a curtain that it's like, well, I don't want to die ever now. But truly he didn't seem too rattled by it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing is that, so he had become this like very, very committed, deeply authentic Christian after that experience. And if his story hadn't been so horrifying in its graphic detail, it would be almost funny in its like cartoonish depiction of hell. It was like, this is literally like what, and the reason I think I really, really wanted to talk about this story, especially in the context of everything else we've been talking about so far about near-death experiences and what they might represent in terms of evidence of the afterlife, is that he didn't talk about having had a deep relationship with religion before. So it wasn't that he had like a very deep or set belief system about what the afterlife would be like. And then he has a near-death experience that puts him in the grips of a hellish near-death experience, and then emerges from that as a really committed Christian. And that's a very fascinating story. It's also very uncommon. There's not like a lot of stories like his. I mean, some people are distressed by the near-death experiences that they have. But when I talked to Jeffrey Long about near-death experiences, and I wanted to know what the percentages were, basically, like how many people have really great experiences versus some, and he said roughly 10% or less of near-death experiences are in some way distressing. Now, a lot of that could be the fact that we live in a very culturally materialistic world. Right. And so a lot of people are not expecting anything to happen after they die. And so if anything happens to them, it might be a little distressing. Yeah. Like, who are these people? why is my body right there? Like, what's going on? There's maybe a really short road to freaking out right there. So about 10% of experiences of that. And then he said that a much smaller percentage of those experiences are like this person we talked to, that would not only be termed distressing, but maybe even hellish. And he didn't have a great explanation as to why that might be. But I would like to propose an idea, Mallory.
Yeah, please. I want to hear it.
What if you, as a person, don't have a very strong belief system? Maybe you haven't thought that much about it, or you're kind of, maybe whatever. Maybe if someone approached you with a lot of certainty about what story, maybe you would be easily convinced by that story. And so what if that kind of person winds up getting sort of vacuumed up in someone else's or some other collective's idea of what a near-death experience should be, or what the afterlife should be? What do you think about that?
Wait, you're saying he was vacuumed up by what a near-death experience should be and had an uncommon one? Like,
Well,
that's the thing I don't understand.
I'm thinking in terms of no, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I'm just like how many people because the vast majority of near-death experiences are sort of like objectively positive and
Right.
subjectively and objectively positive, where you meet loved ones or you meet like angels or you meet God or whatever, and you're told it's not your time and you're
Yes.
whatever, and
Right.
I wonder if like maybe there are some people in the afterlife who are really committed to this idea of hell and that it's really important to scare people straight into their belief system, and maybe they are on the prowl for people who could be maybe converted, to their sort of belief system. I don't know. I'm just like, where did this come from? To me, it felt stagey to me is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like it felt
Oh
like maybe
yeah.
someone had designed it, someone who wasn't him had
Yeah.
designed that experience for him, because they knew that coming out of it, he would then go on to, or we're
Right.
hoping maybe that he would go on to do what he did, which is to be a very committed evangelist for, I mean, frankly, peace and love, like,
Well,
which was
yeah,
really great.
if I remember right, the story went that he was in the agony of being tortured by demons and he was lifted out by a giant hand that he recognized as Jesus Christ's hand.
Yes, exactly.
And like, so what is it that Tom always says about how opposites are the same, only different by degree? Is it from the Kabbalion?
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, is it not just as life affirming to have a terrible experience that you feel saved from? Or not just as whatever might make you live in a way that that feels even more powerful than before this happened, which seems to be across the board what
The
happens
point.
to people. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't exactly, right? It's like people have a brush with death. I've never had a near death experience, but I had a near death experience, which is to say that I was very very ill in 2020. I was in the hospital for like almost 2 weeks, and I did think I might die, and so even just my brush with my mortality affected my life very deeply, in some ways that are negative, but mostly positive. I felt extremely grateful. I remember having a sort of feeling like I was sitting up out of a grave after I like got out of the hospital and was able to like walk for the first time. And to me, that sort of seems to be, I don't know, like we can't point to some like actual reason. We can't point to what's going on. But that seems to be a very, very consistent outcome for people. And it might just be that we don't have all the data in front of us, but you don't hear stories about people who have NDEs and then they're like, well, I want to go back right now, and they die by suicide. It seems like they come back grateful for the experience to some degree, and
A lot of them do have trouble
the result.
reintegrating a bit. Like I know that there's
And
pretty
that
common.
makes sense.
It's pretty common that a lot of people are like, well, it was so great there. Like I don't want to keep doing this thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there are. I think it would have come up in the literature that I have encountered if there was like a higher instance of like people
Suicide.
taking their own lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I don't think there is. I really don't think there is. And so that is interesting. It does seem to suggest that even if it takes you a little while to kind of be okay with being back in this maybe less than totally loving world that we live
Yeah.
in, that eventually you can kind of find your footing, and that it will hopefully have made your experience more meaningful and et cetera. But I still feel very fascinated with this whole idea of a sort of structured, almost architected afterlife.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Both collaborative and potentially more than that. One of the interesting things that came out of the Monroe chapter is that it seemed like there was some organization going on. Like there were people who were working together. Anytime you have people working together, that's an organization. Does that mean that someone is in charge? Like, I don't know. I mean, that might be taking it a step too far, but what does that mean? What does it mean to have something that is architected? What does it mean to have, and it also feels modular. Here's this thing
Yeah, it
that
would
has been
be.
built for these people. And it wouldn't be really outside of the pale to imagine that there were places that were maybe like corded off a little bit, or like sort of shielded. Like this is a place for these people, and like they're not ready to interact with other people yet. And maybe this sort of like staged hell was like, maybe if you were looking at it from the outside, it would just be like a big building, like a big warehouse.
I mean,
You know?
It is what I imagine. I mean, it does match up with, I don't know. Obviously, we were talking about simulation theory last week, and it all just feels like a bunch of simulations. But there's something strange about being like, we just move on to more simulations.
It's simulations all the way down. Well, I think that there's a current theory, and I forget who, I'll have to go. There have been theories around the idea of a holographic universe, which is basically just trying to reduce everything to holograms. It's not really reductionism because holograms are this complicated form, and I'm going to butcher the crap out of this entire theory. So please don't listen to anything I say from now on. But somehow the idea that like every pixel in a hologram or every piece of a hologram contains with it the information from the entire thing. So it's this sort of recursive way to package information is holographically. Extremely high density in terms of information and also extremely efficient. And so if we live in a holographic universe, it means that it would sort of be simulations all the way down, but it would be like, what do we even mean when we say base reality? Like, it's basically just like layers of experience. And you could think about it as basically just like a whole bunch of stacked panes of glass that like your consciousness sort of moves through like up and down and like spends, maybe you can access a lot of the other panes at once. You know, it's like, does that mean, like, what does that mean? Well, it means that the real thing is the thing having the experiences. It's also not to say that any of that's not real. We identify information as real. It's just not something you can necessarily pick up. But then again, maybe it kind of is, because like, what are we, you know, we're just information interacting with other information, and that's fine. What do we wish it was instead? You know?
I think for me, the thing that can be kind of upsetting about it is that it feels like quite cold. But like, I think it's in part just because of our paltry ways of describing it, though. That doesn't make the thing itself somehow void of meaning or beauty. Yeah. It's because I do think that it's simulations all the way down, or that it's just like consciousness is just this sort of paradoxical. It feels kind of impersonal. It doesn't feel like, where's the relationship? I think something obviously very comforting about the idea of a God, especially a God that might look like you, is the idea of relationship, about Absolutely. Shared genetics, about an exchange of familiar. And I don't just mean from a family level, but familiar as in we get it, we understand it. So after my friends died, I had a huge like faith reconstruction. And there was a period of time where I was like, oh, well, God isn't real. Obviously. We just do religion because of how much this sucks. This sucks so bad that we're like anything but like believing that we just disappear and we turn into soil. But like, one of the things that really started kind of rerouting me into a place of belief was loosening my grip on some kind of sure heaven, but really believing that we would be there together. So like, it still really upsets me in church if somebody starts going off about like, well, it says that our bodies are going to be made of this, and like, I'm going to end up here and you're going to end up there. And I'm like, shut up. Shut up. It drives you crazy. There's like almost nothing that makes me matter. But I do feel like all I know about heaven is that you're going to be there and I'm going to be there. Like, it wouldn't be heaven without you. So like,
amen to that, Mallory. Amen to that.
I believe that. When approaching especially subject matter like this, which is like in some ways even harder than some of the we talk about, like the latest in consciousness research, but like the next life, it's like, but come on, you got to pull from like every religious tome, and like you'll never ever get to the bottom of any of it, and we shouldn't. I don't think we should. It doesn't seem like that's the point of life, but I do think that sometimes we have to tap into our different types of knowing for this. Our brains might be like, okay, I think it's something like simulations, But like, I think that's part of the reason you have to kind of ask the body, you have to ask the heart or spirit or whatever you'd like to call it, because we do have different centers for knowing, and words don't quite do it. I do often think, like, when I'm meditating, even sometimes I try to clear out words by saying like, let's go to a place where there aren't words and see what this feels like without words. It's more like music than it is like words. And to me, that's more of like the language of the spirit. And the body feels more like instinctual, like there's like a deeper, deeper, deeper knowing. And that, to me, is the only thing we're really going to get here.
Yeah.
And I have to apply that to the coldness of a simulation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the disservices language does to us is that it implies things that may not be true in the very effort of trying to describe things that are true. So when you say simulation, that implies simulator. It implies like,
Yes.
you know, right? Which may be a thing, but how cold and sad is it to think about the person who created you as a simulator? Like that just what? So I'm sorry. Am I the product of like some video game nerd in a basement? Like that's the worst thing I can imagine.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the problem, is that it conjures up ideas or
true.
images that are not true necessarily. When I was in my first year of college, I was in a math class with a professor that I really, really respected a lot. Like, some of the teachers that you meet, you're just like instantly, you're like, this guy. Like, I like this guy.
Yeah.
There's
like a
I just
soulmate
dug his
kind of
vibe.
connection.
Yeah. And so after class, I decided to go up and ask him what he thought about, because at the time I was wrestling with the idea of multiple dimensions and what that meant in terms of my then cosmological understanding of religion and reality and so on. Basically, how can I reconcile like a multi-dimensional, like a higher dimensional or fourth, fifth, whatever dimensional God with like me in my like three-dimensional reality? And he gave me one of the most profound answers that I've hung on to my whole life, which is, he says, okay, imagine you're a two-dimensional character on a piece of paper, and you live in a two-dimensional world, and all your friends are two-dimensional, and you just kind of do all your two-dimensional things. And then at some point, a handprint appears out of nowhere, and it's just this totally unexplained phenomenon. It's just like this thing that exists suddenly, and then it's gone. And then if you bump out to the third dimension, you know that was just a person putting their fingers on the paper. It's not hard to understand sort of the descent from a higher dimension to a lower dimension if you think about it from the third dimension to the second dimension. He's like, he says, as far as I'm concerned, God is just a higher dimensional being who can very easily manifest into our reality as a three-dimensional being. And so when we think, is God a father or mother figure? Is God a person that looks like us? And I think the easiest and probably best answer is yes, but also, you know what I mean? God is not just that. But yes, why not that? Just like am I not my handprint? Well, no, I'm not. I'm obviously not just my handprint, but I am my handprint. Like that is my handprint. That's my hand. It is part of me. So it's not fair of us to say, oh, well, God is not that thing. It's like, why wouldn't God be that thing? Like, why wouldn't God be a lower dimensional thing as well as all of the higher dimensional things God is?
Wow, that's excellent. That's canonized for sure in my brain and soul. That's really good. You've been like nudging me toward this whenever I start like going off a cliff on the podcast. that like it can be both, and that the answer almost always seems to be both. That this is an ampersand universe where it might seem like, wait, but if it's all of us, then how can there be you and me? And like, if we're all just merging into a blob, then how but it can. And again, especially when I turn off my like yammering brain, I feel like it could be both.
Yeah.
I feel like it could be both.
And blob is just bad branding.
It is. It is. Like, I mean, like, even just the way that we talk about and think about computers, we have so many, like, just kind of douchebag narratives around, like, computers being inhuman and ruining things about humanity. Like, of course, the idea that it's like, oh, yeah, it's just a computer. It's like, oh, that's, like, the most depressing. That's so depressing, versus, like, the idea that we're this big, beautiful family or whatever. Like, that might feel more human to us. And I could see, again, like, why I love returning to what you were saying about Robert Monroe right at the beginning, that, like, think about the universe being so kind that it would set up your own personalized on-ramp into whatever's next, sending doctors to a hospital. That just seems so sweet to me. Can I read you something that you can cut if you want to, because this is more specifically to like Mormon ideas, but have you read Sam Norton's Come As You Are by any chance?
I haven't.
It's really lovely. He's basically just breaking down like how we need to approach everything differently if young people are going to keep being Mormon. We really need to redo a lot of our like our just very rigid cultural ways of feeling comfortable. And so he's breaking down the idea of the final judgment and the idea that like some people's broken families aren't going to make it kind of a thing. He's like, why do you think it's problematic for kids who like half their friends
the majority
are gay
of whom
and they're
come from broken families?
It's like, if you have all of these ideas that basically mean that you're like you're going to be in heaven alone. Like, why would you want that? And he breaks it down in a way that was so similar to what you were saying that I just wanted to share it with you. He says, as leaders, teachers, and parents, let's replace the threatening courtroom and the judge's gavel as imagery for the final judgment. We might instead use an analogy of an old hotel, where behind the reception desk neatly hang seemingly infinite individual room keys. Each key leads to a room that has been prepared and made up. There is a room for everybody. No exceptions. Our loving Heavenly Father earnestly wants us to come to the hotel to announce ourselves at the reception desk and to claim our key. There is a key and a room for each of our family members, our friends, strangers in the street, and of course for us, no matter what our mortal experiences have made us feel about ourselves. It seems like a really simple thing. But I think for people, especially maybe coming from a Christian background, where the first time I tried to give a Book of Mormon to another Christian friend, which I only did one time because this is how it went. She told me I was going to hell. You know what I mean? I was in middle school, and I was always encouraged to be a missionary and to like share my gospel with people. And, you know, just the idea that it's like, sorry, you're going to make it. I'm not. I'm going to make it. You're not. Those people are going to burn. I'm going to, it's like.
It's insane.
It actually feels quite insane.
I'm going to say something that I want to put behind the paywall. So we're going to end now.
Okay. Let's end now.
So our paid subscribers can look forward to that. By the way, we just did this thing where we decided that we would be more than happy to give people a month of access to all of our paywalled content if they just send us proof that you shared the show with someone. Redeemable forever by anyone, always. So if you share it with 5 people, 5 months behind the paywall. If you share it with 100 people, you're, 10 years.
We would really, really love it if you shared it. We're very keen on making lots of friends here and being able to have lots more interesting conversations and hopefully to eventually get to a point where we can be aggregating some anecdotal data from each other as well, because that's what so many of these conversations are about. We want to hear about your NDEs and we want to hear about your synchronicities and your grandma's ghost stories, and that's what we're doing here. We're breaking down the inexplicable.
Yeah. The more people listen to the show, the more people leave comments, and the stuff that people tell us is just so awesome. Like, I've been down so many rabbit holes just off casual mentions in the comments, so thank you.
We love you and appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Couple of quick reminders before you go. First off, if you haven't left a rating on your platform of choice, please do that. One of the first things people look at when they're judging a show by its cover is the number of ratings it has. So if you dig what we're doing, show it with stars. In the epilogue, we talked about why God might call most Christian creeds an, and I quote, abomination, the real definition of moral courage, and how social media is a lot like carbon monoxide, lulling doom scrollers into the sleep of death. If you want to hear it, go to godsghostsufos.com or find the link in the description. See you next week, friends.